Hello everybody, this is Paige from Paperbacks and Lattes, and today this is my September wrap-up, everything that I read in the month of September. I had a great reading month. I just want to go ahead and let it be known that the month of September for me was a very taboo and forbidden and slash dark romance type of reads. Almost all of it was. So if you have any issues with taboo, like extremely taboo and dark romance, then you probably should skip this video. But if you don't mind, keep watching. So I had a total of 22 books read, and I DNF'd 2 books. So the first book that I read in September was Her Perfect by Steffi Walls. This is a book about Eli and Colby. Eli is a teacher who has come to this town. It's actually a town his best friend from college is from. And so he comes to this town to teach at this at a school. And Colby is 18. I think she's 18 when the book starts. And she's in one of his classes, and this is a romance between them. It's a student slash teacher romance. There's not very many years apart from them, so it's not a huge age gap. It's only like 5 or 6 years, which is not huge. But there are a lot of trigger warnings going into this book because Colby has a lot of issues. Her family pretty much ignores her. She's the only girl, and she has several brothers, and they all tend to put their attention on them because they're very it's a very football oriented family, and she is completely the opposite. Like her activity, her sport is playing the piano, and she's extremely good at it, but they don't really give her the credit due, or I mean, they don't even come to her recitals or things like that. So she's very ignored, very looked over. She does have one brother she's close to, but for the majority of the time she's looked over, and she also has a eating disorder. So if you have any kind of triggers, please look up the triggers for this book. She just is very troubled, and when she meets Eli, they have this chemistry and they form this connection, and he notices that she is very looked over in her family, and he's very distraught by this because he sees how wonderful she is. And so they just really form up a friendship, and then that turns into a lover's relationship, and it's a beautiful story. I love the progression of Colby, of how far she came in the story from when she started to the end, and I just love their love story. It was very sweet, hard hitting topics, but a beautiful story nonetheless. And then the second book I read was The Wild by Kay Webster. This is the first book in the Wild series. This is extremely, extremely, extremely taboo. So I read this for the Taboo Book Club that is hosted by Jen and Tamika. I will have their channels listed below. They recently started a Taboo Book Club, and they have a theme for every month, and they pick 2 books to read for that theme. The month of September was Familial Love, and this follows a girl named Devin, and she goes off, she and her parents, her mom and dad, they go off to the wilderness. They want to live off the grid. They've had a lot of trauma that has happened in their past, and they're just wanting to get away from it all and just, be out in the wilderness. Well, a tragedy happens, an accident where her mom dies, and it's just her and her dad out in the middle of nowhere. They have no transportation, they have nothing. They salvage, because they had an RV, they salvage pieces off the RV. Her dad builds them a cabin and all that. They live off the land. pretty much stranded. They're the only two people like left. I mean, they're the only people there, and they form a connection with each other. So they are attracted to each other, and I know this is very, 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 very taboo, and I do not agree with it in real life. This is a book. This is a make-believe story. It was written for fun, written just, you know, to read about, but of course this should never happen in real life. But so Devin and her dad have a relationship, so very taboo, of course. I enjoyed the story. Of course, sometimes it got weird. I won't deny that part, but this book was filled with extreme angst, because if there is not a more forbidden circumstance than your own family. So anyway, moving on. The next book is Like Dragonflies by Kay Webster and Danielle James. This was the second book for the Taboo Book Club in September. This follows Sage and Mars. They meet at this coffee shop because Mars gets a job at a coffee shop, and she comes in, you know, she loves her coffee. And she meets him there, and they strike up a friendship, and then that turns into a relationship. And then the bomb drops. They find out that they are half brother and sister. They are from the same dad, but they never knew about each other because her mom kept it hidden. Even the dad didn't know. So they're half brother and sister, and so they loved each other so much. And even though they knew that it was wrong or not up to society standards, they still found a way to be together because they loved each other so much. The next book I read is The Free by Kay Webster. This is the second book in the Wild series. This follows Atticus and Eve. Atticus is a character from the first book, The Wild. He is actually the one who sells the land to Devin's dad, Reed. And he eventually comes out to check on them and bring them supplies when they need it. So he likes to live kind of off the grid, like far enough out of town where he's considered, you know, alone, but not so far out in the wilderness that, you know, he's living completely off the grid. So in the first book, you see this girl named Eve. She is rescued by Reed. In the first book, she was brought up in incest. Her family was all, you know, her mom, dad, and brothers were all together. So she is bred from incest, and she was rescued from her family because they raped her. So that is a trigger in this book. And Atticus just has a soft spot in his heart towards Eve. And then something happens where she is badly injured, so he has to take her back to his home and have a doctor come look at her. And she heals there at his home. And she is like so new to this world. She's never seen electricity. She's never had coffee. She loves to brush her teeth. She had never brushed her teeth before. Just a hot shower thing, you know, just small things that we all take for granted she had never seen before. And he introduced her to this world, and they fell in love. And then, but there is a huge bombshell in the book, but I will not tell you so it doesn't spoil the book for you. But there is a very taboo element to this book as well. The next book is Tortured Whispers by Danielle James. This follows Brooklyn and Caesar. So Caesar is Brooklyn's uncle, and he comes to stay with her and her dad because her dad and Caesar are brothers. And they've only seen each other like one time in her life, and that was when she was very young. They've talked on the phone occasionally for like birthdays and things like that, but they've never really spent any time together. He's a very well-known child psychologist, and he comes to stay with them, and he automatically recognizes that Brooklyn has troubles, and her dad is kind of reluctant to tell him that, yeah, she does. This book has a lot of triggers as well. She harms herself, she cuts herself, and because she has severe depression and anxiety, and she has like a speaking issue, so that really hinders her, and she's bullied a lot. And her dad, something happens to her dad, and so now she is under the care of her uncle, and they fall in love because they are not really an uncle and niece type of relationship. So they have insane chemistry. They try to fight it, but in the end, they love each other enough to want to be together, even though it breaks all of society's standards. The next book is Echo by Seven Rue. I really enjoyed this book. This follows Echo. She is a girl who was born mute. Something happened to her vocal cords, and she has never been able to speak. So she signs. She uses sign language as her communication, and her mom abandons her when she's 4 and leaves her with her stepdad. Her stepdad is very abusive to her, and when she's 17, she runs away. 17 or 18, I'm blinking on the age right at the moment, but she runs away because she can't take it anymore, and she runs out into the woods, into the forest, and she happens upon this cabin that is just, out there, nobody's there, so she takes shelter in it. And a few weeks after she's living there, the owners arrive, and it's 3 brothers. Their names are Willem, Norden, and Summit. And this is like their hunting cabin because this is like their side business. They hunt for this meat and furs and whatnot. And they stay there for a few months to gather, all this meat for their clients, and then they'll take it back to where they live. So they discover her there, and they don't push her out, they don't make her leave, and they get to know her situation, and all 3 of them fall in love with her, and they all have a relationship together. So this is a reverse harem story. It was really good. I really loved Echo and the 3 brothers, and they all had a different type of personality, and each one treated her very well, and it was just a really good story. The next one is Hell by Kay Webster. This follows Hudson and Riley. Hudson and Riley are brother and sister. Hudson is in college, and Riley is still at home in school, and Riley suffers from severe anxiety. Both of their parents die in a horrific car crash, and now Riley lives with her aunt and uncle, in which her aunt really she takes care of her because it's the right thing to do, but it's hard on her aunt because her aunt doesn't really understand Riley, and she's really kind of hard on her. And Hudson and Riley just kind of bond. They were not very close before this, but they bond because they lost their parents together, and so they're going through this horrible grief from this horrible tragedy, and they bond and have this chemistry together. And of course, it's very taboo. It's from Kay Webster. What do you expect? But this is a relationship between Hudson and Riley. The next book is Sugar Daddies by Jade West. I extremely enjoyed this book. This is a menage story. This is about Katie, Carl, and Rick. Katie signs up on this website called Sugar Daddies, and Rick and Carl are on there. They are looking for a girl to be to join them in bed, but also they want a relationship. They want to find a relationship with a girl. They want to find somebody to love them and be with them, because they want that type of relationship so that they can eventually have a family, because they don't just want a donor or a surrogate. They want somebody to actually join their family and be a part of it. And So this is what they're hoping for. Katie is on this website because she's trying to save money up to buy this horse place. She is really into horses. She has one and she wants to buy it because that's what she wants to do with her life. And so she signs up for this website to make money. And so she has like to come over to their house like a weekend per month and all that. And of course she stays over there quite a bit more than that because they get to know each other, they get closer, they bond, there's chemistry. I love Rick and Carl's relationship, and then adding Katie in the mix of that was just, it was a wonderful story and I loved it so much. Then I read Whispers in the Roars by Kay Webster. This book I went into completely blind. Even the synopsis was so vague. I didn't know what to expect. So this follows Katie and Yeo. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Katie and Yeo were friends since children, and they grew up as best friends, and then of course when they were teenagers they grew feelings for each other and fell in love. But Yeo had a chance to leave for college, and Katie pushed him to go because she knew that she was holding him back because she has many issues. She knew she was holding him back, so she let him go and said, go, you know, I'm holding you back, please go. He went, but it was always with the intent of coming back to her because he knew he couldn't take care of her if he wasn't well equipped to do so. So he goes to college and he comes back and he now has his doctorate degree. He's like a psychologist, psychiatrist, and he comes back to, you know, win her back again and tell her that, you know, he's always loved her. He's never quit loving her. But there is this huge part of this book that I will not tell you because it is best if you just go in blind. I never expected it. Never expected this to happen. It was pretty shocking, to say the least. But it just made this book what it was. And I want to tell you so bad. But I know that you will go in, if you go into this book blind, it'll be a better experience for you reading it in the long run. So just trust me when I say this is not taboo as in, you know, familial relationships or anything like that. It's just it's issues that she suffers from that makes this story what it is. So that's all I'll say. It's a great book. I really enjoyed it, and I've never read anything like it before. The next book I read is Transcendence by Shay Savage. This book was amazing. This is a caveman love story. This is about a girl named Elizabeth. She accidentally goes back in time to the caveman type back in time, and she falls in this trap that this caveman had set for, you know, animals. He automatically thinks she is his mate because he is actually alone. All of the rest of his tribe, his community died in a fire, and so he has been all alone for a long time, and he was close to the point of giving up because he was just so lonely. And he found her and was so excited that she was there for him. Of course, she was from modern times, so she's like, hold up, dude. We are not mates. They were not able to have a communication because he could not learn her language, couldn't learn signs or anything. He did eventually learn a couple of words, but you know, he really didn't understand anything, and so they communicated by body language and facial expressions, and they fell in love with each other and had a beautiful love story. And then the next book I read is Lattes by Shay Savage. This is the second book in the Transcendence series. This is the novella that follows Transcendence. This is a short story from the Elizabeth's point of view because the main book, Transcendence, is only from his point of view. And so we get a little bit of insight from how she was looking at things that were happening throughout the story. It was a wonderful addition to the story, and I'm glad Shea Savage added it to the series. The next book I read is Breaking Perfect by Lydia Michaels. This is a menage story. So this follows Mason and Liberty and Sean. So Mason had a relationship with Sean back in college, but then Sean had issues because his dad did not approve of him being gay or bi, and so Sean cut off the relationship, which broke both of their hearts. And then later on, Mason met Liberty and he married her. They fell in love and they got married. And Liberty has a lot of anxiety issues. She is a very OCD. She has to have things just so, because her past was very traumatic. She came from a very unhealthy, unstable home, and how she was treated has caused her to have these issues. She has an immaculate home. She has her routine she has to stick to. She has to do things a certain way. And Mason is a doctor. I think he's a general surgeon or something to that effect. He works at the ER. And he understands this about her. He loves her. And he does everything he can to help her. And then Sean comes back into his life. He shows up at the door one day because his dad had just died. And he's just kind of lost and trying to figure himself out. And Liberty answers the door. And, you know, him and Liberty kind of get to know each other before Mason gets home. And Mason and Sean, you know, they haven't seen each other in so long. And now old feelings are starting to resurface. But Mason told him, you know, that Liberty comes first. You know, he is all for Liberty. He has made these vows and promises to Liberty, and she is what comes first and foremost in his life. And then they all have a relationship with each other. So it was a very beautiful story. I loved their relationship. I loved how probably one of my favorite things is how much Mason loved and adored Liberty, and he did everything in his power to make sure she was okay, and I loved that. It was a beautiful story, and I loved it. The next book I read is North by Danielle James. This is also another taboo book. This is about North and Kane. So this is a stepdad / stepdaughter relationship. He used to be married to her mom, but they got divorced because her mom is a drug addict. And so when her mom dies from overdosing, she goes to live with Kane because she is not quite 18 yet. And they had already had some, you know, chemistry going before he had left. So when she comes to move in with him, you know, they notice that chemistry again, and this is a story about their relationship. The next book is Den of Vipers by K.A. Knight. This was a very, very dark romance. This is a reverse harem. This is about, let's see, I will find their names. I have them written down. So this is about Tessa, and she owns this bar, and her dad owes these guys. They're kind of like mafia type guys. Two of them are biological brothers, and the other two are just guys that they've taken in, and now they're all kind of like a family. And Tessa's dad owes them a lot of money, and so they go in to collect their debt. He does not have the money, and so he tells them to take his daughter instead. So, kind of a piece of crap dad. And they send in these like guys to go get her, and she's not having it. She has her bat, it's a baseball bat, and she beats up these grown men with this baseball bat. And then they have to come in to get her, and she tries to beat them up as well, but of course they are they knock her out so they can take her back to their apartment. And then they figure out that, oh, this is not a meek and quiet and scared little girl. This is a girl who is going to fight us all the way. She is like their, I wouldn't say prisoner, but she is their like property now, because she was actually, you know, sold to them by her dad. And then they really start to come to like her, because she is so spunky. She does not take any of their crap. Like when they first have her in her room, she destroys her room. When they let her out, she destroys like the main guy. Let's see, what's his name? Ryder. Ryder wears suits, and there's these expensive suits, and so she goes into his closet and cuts them all up with scissors except for one. She's just like, she's not gonna just lay down and take it. But they all come to like each other and love each other, and they all have they're all a little crazy. Especially the one named Diesel. He has he's like their guy that will torture people to get like information out of them. He loves to torture people, and so that even comes into like he includes that in his sexual relationship with her. So just be forewarned that pretty much any type of trigger is mentioned in this book. It's a dark romance between Roxy, Ryder, Garrett, Diesel, and Kenzo. So those are their names. Oh, I previously mentioned that her name is Tessa. I was looking at the wrong thing. Her name is Roxy. So anyway, that is Den of Vipers by Kay and I really enjoyed it, even though it was so dark and whatnot. I still enjoyed it. The only complaint I had was it was a little too long. It got to be too much at the end. I'm like, okay, just end now. I think it could have been a little shorter, but that was my only complaint about it. Next we have Cutting Edge by C.D. Reese. This follows Grayson and Caden. Grayson is in the Army. She is a psychiatrist, whichever one. She is deployed overseas for these soldiers who are in the midst of war, and her job is to keep these doctors who are working nonstop around the clock, to keep their minds alert, to keep them awake, and to keep them functioning, to patch up these soldiers that are coming in so badly injured from war, and to also keep their minds, you know, stable, because when you're in that type of situation, you see a lot of bad, gruesome things. And so she's also there to, you know, give advice, you know, just keep these doctors and nurses healthy in their bodies and their minds. And there she meets Caden. He is a doctor. He is not in the Army. He's like in a contract by the Army, but he is a trauma surgeon, and he works hard. He like at one point worked almost like 5 to 7 days in a row without sleeping. She just had to keep giving him adrenaline and like these B vitamin shots just to keep him healthy and alert and going. And they're instantly attracted to each other. They have chemistry, and then they form a relationship with each other. And then she is going to be deployed to somewhere else, and he does not want her to leave. And so that's kind of where the first one ends. This is like a prequel to the series. I did not continue into the series because I did read the synopsis to the second book, and it sounds like they are going to have troubles in the relationship. And I just loved their relationship so much in this first book that I didn't want to ruin. I didn't want to have their relationship spoiled in my mind. So I haven't read on. I'm sure one day I will continue the series, but for now I just want to keep their relationship nice and tidy in my mind and not have it be corrupted in the second book. Then I read With Visions of Red by Trisha Wolfe. This is book 1, book 2, and book 3. So they're all named the same thing, With Visions of Red. You just have the 3 parts. And this follows Sadie and Colton. Sadie is a profiler. She's like a person that helps the detectives figure out who the killer is, who murders these people. And there's a serial killer on the loose in their area, and they're trying to track the serial killer down and stop him before he kills anybody else. But he's also very attracted to Sadie, and he kind of is stalking her as well. And there is some very dark and creepy moments in this book. This is a dark romance. And then she meets Colton at this club. It's like a BDSM club she goes to, and they form a relationship, and it's beautiful. It's a dark story, but it's still very beautiful. Then this next book I read is Slave to Sensation by Nalani Singh. This is the first book in the Psy Changeling series. So this is about Sasha. She is a Psy. Psy are beings, like, they communicate through their minds, and they have blocked any type of emotion. They feel like they can, emotion makes them weak, emotion makes them make mistakes, and so they have cut any type of emotion out of themselves. And then she meets Lucas, who is a changeling. He's actually like a panther, leopard changeling, a cat changeling, and they're attracted to each other. And Sasha is fighting these emotions that she is not supposed to be having, and she could be she is having to hide these emotions within herself, because if the Psy finds out she's having these emotions, they'll pretty much make her where she's like brain dead, and she does not want that. She'd rather just be dead than walk around like a zombie. And she and Lucas are working on this project together, and he is attracted to her, and he is trying to show her that there is more to life than how she lives, and she wants it really bad. This is their love story. I loved it so much. I cannot wait to read further on into the series. I loved all of the Psy, the changelings, and the humans that are in this world. Loved it so much. The next book I read is Win Some, Lose Some by Shay Savage. This follows Matthew and Mayra. Matthew is on the autism spectrum. He is 18. He is now living on his own in his own house because both of his parents have died. He does have an older sister, but she is in a institution because she is also on the spectrum, but she's a lot worse off than he is, and he cannot at the moment care for her in their home because he's going to school. He's working online, making money because he's paying for her treatment and whatnot. But he does have an uncle and aunt close by who does help him. He has severe anxiety, and he has these severe panic attacks. It happens when like his routine is changed and things, because he is very affected by his autism. But one day he is involved in a fender bender, not due to his fault, but it kind of changes his life because Mayra is a girl from school. She's actually in his class, and she offers him a ride home, and then they are put together on this group project in their class. And so they start to spend a lot of time with each other, and he becomes very heavily dependent on her. He adds her to his routine. At first, she changed his routine, and it really was hard for him. But then he came to enjoy her presence, enjoy her being added to his life. And then it was like he couldn't live without her. And it was such a sweet story. I love this one so much. The love they shared, Everything that they go through, it really gives you an insight to somebody on the autism spectrum, and I just loved it so much. I can't recommend this book enough. And then I read Cat's Got Your Heart by Gem Zero. This is a book that I read for the Kindle Clear Out readathon. So this is about two guys named Jericho and Harinder. Jericho goes to this pet shop because he is looking to adopt a cat, because one day he went to go visit his sister and her cat ran out the door, got lost, and her sister has been extremely sad about it. So he goes to try to find her another cat, and there he meets Harinder, the very, very, very grumpy pet store employee. Harinder is very protective of these animals. One time he had a very bad experience about a man buying a bird, and then he got left in the hot car and the bird died, and Harinder is just extremely afraid for these animals, that they are going to people who are inadequate to take care of them, and so he pretty much chases everybody off that wants to adopt these animals, because he'd rather take care of them, because he's extremely loving. He has such a soft heart, and even though he has such a grumpy character, his love for animals is amazing. And so he puts Jericho through all these rigorous and ridiculous things that he has to do in order to adopt this cat, because he's hoping Jericho will just give up like most other people. Well, Jericho takes it as a challenge, and he's not going to back down to this guy, and he's going to meet him at every turn and give it back. And so they strike up this, it's really hate to love relationship. It starts as hate, very strong dislike, and then it slowly morphs into a friendship. And then Harinder is suddenly homeless because his living situation was compromised. So he has nowhere to go, so Jericho offers him, to come stay with him until he can get his living situation sorted. And then they're living together, and feelings start happening, and, Harinder is trying to, well, they're both trying to avoid these feelings for each other, but they finally give in, and they have this awesome relationship. This is a very low steam book. It really has, not much at all, but their relationship was so adorable. I laughed several times throughout this book through their banter, and I loved these guys' relationship so much. The only drawback to this book is the writing. It was a little weird, but other than that, their relationship was so adorable and cute to read. And the last book I read for September was Damaged Goods by Talia Hibbert. This is the Ravenswood series, number 1.5. So this is a novella in the series. I have not read any other books, but this was fine reading it as a standalone. I read this book also for the Kindle Clear Out readathon. This was about Laura, who was in a very abusive marriage to her husband, and she leaves him after she became pregnant. He told her to have an abortion. She said, no, this is my baby. I want my baby. And he, this is kind of the last straw for her. She leaves him because he is very abusive toward her. And she goes back to this place that they had visited when she was a childhood by the beach. And this is where she had fallen in love with her childhood sweetheart, Samir. And they run into each other again after all this time, and Samir gets to know her again. Well, they both get to know each other again, and Samir uncovers, the truth about the kind of relationship she's been in, which really makes him furious. And she's pregnant, and he goes through this pregnancy with her. He buys like a baby book to know, and she doesn't even know that he has done this, but he wants to help her. He wants to help protect her and do everything he can because he still loves her. And really their love never changed. They just fell in love all over again, and he loves her and her child, and it was such a beautiful story. This was a short story, but it was beautiful nonetheless, and I really enjoyed it. So those are all the books I read for September. Let me know what you read for September and if you've read any of the books that I've read and how you like them. So I hope you guys have a great day, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!